Welcome to Modern Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping you feel better about your finances. I'm your host, Jim Grace, and I'll be your guide as we discuss the psychology of money and explore the emotional aspects that shape our financial decisions and how we feel about them. A quick note before we start, although I do hope that you find the information on this show to be helpful, in no way are any of these discussions to be taken as specific financial advice. Please do your own research and talk to your own advisors, especially when making important financial decisions. Hey everybody, welcome to Modern Financial Wellness. My guest today is Jen Reed. She is the CEO and financial consultant at Base Financial Planning, Financial Consulting, and Education. Jen, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here. So excited to chat with you.
Likewise. So I find your story and your journey to founding your company to be really interesting. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your background. And specifically, you weren't in financial services at the time. This all kind of started out, from what I understand, when you went to seek out some financial advice yourself. Would you take us back? What were you looking for? Where were you at? And what did you find when you started to look for some help?
Yeah, I feel like I was in a similar boat that a lot of recent college grads were in. It was like, yeah, I got this great salary, making great money. It felt super good. I was like, yeah, $100,000 a year. That should support the lifestyle that I wanted, and was trying to just hustle to pay the bills, and just kept finding it was like, all right, I have student loan debt. Now I have a car loan. Now I have a wedding I'm planning that's going to cost me $80,000. And every time I turned around, it was like there's more and more money adding up on the credit card, and I just couldn't figure out how to manage it. And there's that kind of moment in your head, well, hey, if I talk to a financial advisor, shouldn't they be able to help me figure out this life and figure out how to organize
that's a thing,
myself?
Right? There's people out there to help.
Right. Financial advisor. That would make sense, right?
Right. Yeah.
And my parents had always had a financial advisor. He was a Merrill Lynch guy that I kind of reached out to and was like, hey, help me. And he just kind of looked at me and was like, yeah, set up a Roth IRA. And, once you start to figure it out, hit me up again. And it was this moment of wait, that's it? You're just going to tell me to set up a Roth IRA and put $50 in it a month and then never talk to me again.
Right.
And after that, I kind of just got was hungry to learn more, because I was that just can't be it. And
what were you doing professionally at the time? What was your background, or where'd you go to school for?
Yeah, so I have a construction management degree from Wentworth Institute of Technology. So a lot of that project management and data, that kind of I think triggered that how do I manage all of this? There's got to be something.
An engineer at heart, right? There's got to be a way to solve this problem.
Give me the data. I'm a problem solver.
Right.
But I was working, kind of doing, OPM work, kind of a little bit of everything. It was a small company. And after kind of just I found some podcasts, I found the Dave Ramsey, I found Ramit Sethi, I found all these kind of courses and ways to just start managing and handling day-to-day cash flow. And that's really what was the more aware I am of my spending, the more I can save, and how do I organize these accounts to make myself feel more confident making financial decisions.
Yeah.
And that's where I was all right, I kind of like this stuff. I like managing money. And then I kind of started dipping my toes into, all right, investing, and what does that actually look like? And I feel that's the line sometimes where people just get so nervous to invest that they never kind of take it outside of that into just opening up a Fidelity account, right? That feels intimidating sometimes.
Yeah. It's an interesting connection, because I go back to what you started with, which was acknowledging that you were just really reaching out for help. And I feel like you're not unlike a lot of people out there, where the help that sounds like you needed wasn't necessarily right away. How do I invest or set up a Roth and, think about tax-free growth and time value of money. It was more of like project management, which is your background, which is help managing the day to day and building like a good foundation to grow from. And unfortunately, as you found out, like the industry is kind of set up in the first route where until you're already established, there's not a lot of people out there that are willing to help in the way that you need it.
Yeah. And I don't know if you face this too, but I think a lot of the discovery calls that I take with clients right now, like they don't even know what they need or what they're looking for.
Right. Well, and I know one thing that they don't often bring up is asset allocation and diversification. So like the technical aspects of investing and what I think a lot of the industry puts out as value is investment focused and investment management. And I think if clients do know what they need help with, it's something a little bit more, it's a deeper need and like a recognition that they need some help, right? To manage the day to day. And it has far less to do, I feel like these days, than help me take a look at these funds and analyze, which ones I did well on and which ones I didn't. Like, they know they need to save and invest for the future, but they're not really thinking on that level. They're needing help with something else. Yeah.
And I think that biggest piece is like the first step of like having someone to hold your hand a little bit and just like take me through step one of understanding what I'm spending every month, or if I'm overspending, or how much should I be putting into savings, or do I have too much in cash?
Right. So you're educating yourself, you're finding podcasts, you're finding some of these thought leaders in the space. Where do you go from there?
I got brought into New York Life Insurance, basically being told that I could kind of manage and create whatever practice I wanted to, and got sold, hook, line, and sinker right into it, and was working there. And they do that, reach out to 200 friends and family and try and get as many clients as you can. But the goal being to sell a lot of life insurance. And
yeah, I still get a pit in my stomach hearing you describe the Project 200, it was called, at MetLife, where I started. New York Life probably had a similar name for it. So yeah, my skin crawls when I hear that and thinking back about, talking to my aunts and uncles anyway, I digress.
Yeah. And I failed miserably there because I just didn't believe in their system and their process, because I don't think that selling someone life insurance solves their financial problems. Most of them are still trying to figure out, how to pay off debt and how to save for kids' college educations. And they're dealing with a lot of other things, and talking to them one time a year and quickly reviewing their insurance policies doesn't solve the problem. So it was like, before they kind of let me go, I made the decision to be like, all right, I think it's time to part ways. Yeah. And I'm really glad I learned what I learned while I was there from the product side, just to understand it and learn it. But ultimately it was like, I need to take this into a space where I can coach people and help them, and they can reach out to me once a month if they need to schedule a meeting and feel like they can talk through their like money struggles or whatever came up that month.
That type of process that you envisioned, even though they talked about setting up your practice the way that you wanted, it didn't really fit into the model.
No, because I couldn't do a flat rate like retainer fee or flat fee there. They really wanted that commission based, because it's that multi-level marketing piece where everybody gets paid if you sell a product.
Right. So you leave New York Life and you go independent with an RIA?
Yeah. So I had worked for like a couple of like small like RIAs just to kind of feel out how they were doing things. But luckily enough, they let me build like my financial coaching practice on the side, where I was doing more like budgeting coaching, and kind of felt like a little bit of life coaching too, like just helping people get through, spending woes and paying off debt and things like that. So it was good experience. But then, I was doing that for about 6 months, and then really just kind of said, I think I can do this on my own, and took it from there.
That's awesome. So that becomes base. That's your launch into your own thing in your process. So I want to dig into that a little bit. But first, just wanted to ask you, so typically when clients show up to work with you, what do they look like? And what are some of the issues or problems or anxieties they have around money? What do you typically see in the clients that seek your help?
Yeah. So the people that are coming to me usually have like no systems at all. They don't feel comfortable talking about money. They either avoid it or don't pay attention to it at all. A lot of them, they're high income earners, but potentially still have some debt that they're working through and need somebody to kind of just hold them accountable and say, hey, we need to check in on this and you need to look at your spending a little bit more. Like they need that high attention to detail. Somebody that's going to like light a fire under their butt a little bit and say like, and sometimes that's what I am. I'm the bad guy that says like, we need to make some conscious decisions when you're looking at, the next quarter or the next 6 months and you have to be able to say no to some things.
Yeah. And I think the friendlier way to describe that might be like accountability partner. But I think all of us need that in one way or another in our lives. And so it makes total sense that with money and managing your finances, having somebody that can be the bad guy or the accountability partner to light the fire can be extremely valuable, which is the thing that I really love about coaching. And I think it gets overlooked. And why I wanted to talk to you about it is because, there's the whole planning for the future, taking a look at the asset allocation that I kind of discredited before, but it is important. Obviously, your investments fund your future financial goals. But I think a lot of us could benefit from the accountability, the motivation, the education, and the coaching, which is really, really cool. So would you mind taking us through what does your typical process look like? Where do you start to kind of unpack the situation with the client? And what are the typical first couple of steps? What does that look like?
Yeah. So a lot of it is just understanding like goals first off, because like I think it goes back to like financial planners that are doing holistic planning realize that the why and the goals are going to be the biggest piece of the puzzle and the biggest motivator for clients. So walking through like what they love doing, where they spend their money, like what brings them joy, what they see their future looking like, walking through like scenarios to help them dream a little bit. Is really that like exciting and motivating factor that's just like, hey, we're not actually talking about money at all, but I want to know what you want your life to look like, where money can help support that.
Yeah. And I'd imagine these same clients that they haven't put any systems or process in place, they probably haven't spent a ton of time really flushing some of those questions out and trying to truly understand their why. Or do you find that some people come and they really specifically know, what they want to do?
Most of them have no idea.
Yeah.
And they will sometimes have like, well, yeah, it'd be nice to retire or retire early. Like they're very like broad, generalized, but I'm like, well, what does like retiring early look like? Is that at 50, 40? Like there's so like, talk me through that. Give me details. Are you still living your life the way you're living it? Or are you like traveling the world and living this bougie life out, like give me the details of what that could actually look and feel like, because that's when the money can actually support that and we can do things in order to make that happen.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's so useful to explore that and have it part of the process, because I think we're all trained by society that retirement's supposed to look a certain way, right? We work for X number of years and then we retire close to 65 and that's, I'm done working for a paycheck. But that whole paradigm is totally up to you, right? And you do have a lot more control than I think people realize of that. But you need systems and process, and you got to start somewhere. So flushing out the why, understanding where they're coming from and what it is they're trying to accomplish as kind of the first step. And then where do you typically go from there? What does your program typically look like? Yeah.
So I have monthly calls. That's usually where I like to have clients have like a monthly money date with me. It's not required. It's not mandatory, but it really just creates that like system where it's like, we're just creating like a space where you can sit down and look at your money and have time allocated to say, where did money go this month? Like, what do we have coming up the next 3 months? It gives them that that opportunity to talk about money a little bit too. And sometimes the meetings are sexy and fun, and we're talking about the vacations and how we're going to, save for those. And sometimes they're, not related to money or anything at all, but it creates that space where we have some time to even get through some homework items or some action items.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where sometimes, and maybe you find this too, but it's like, it's easy to give clients homework, and they're like, yeah, we're excited to do that. I'll do that, in the next hour after I get off the phone with you. And then you circle back with them. And you're like, okay, you never did what I asked you to do. Because some of my clients really need that. Like, all we're doing right now is like the homework that we were supposed to be doing.
Right. Right. And it's their time and space, I guess. Right. So if you want to fill it up by doing the homework, that's one way of utilizing that time. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And again, back to the accountability piece. I love the way that you refer to those meetings as money dates with you. So I think it's a common recommendation in the industry to, if you're in a coupled relationship, to have a money date with your spouse and set aside some time to sit down and go over the things that you just described, what's going on, what happened, what's upcoming. But I think that sometimes that's tough for clients to give themselves that space on their own and stick to it. Right. So having something on the calendar where they're going to show up with you, I think is a huge benefit on a regular basis. And I love the way that you describe it as a money date with your coach. And, instead of going off on your own to do that work, I think that's super valuable.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many times where even with my own, like my husband, I'm like, okay, we need to sit down and do something. And it's so easy to get put off. So I feel like sometimes when you have that coach or person in your life where like, we have scheduled time to do this, let's do it.
Yeah. Meeting time, we call it a stand up. I think people should call it whatever they want. I was adverse to calling it a money date because it was a painful conversation often. And I didn't want to associate dates with my wife with, these tough, sometimes conversations with money. So, and my wife's a project manager, so we call them stand-ups. But even somebody like me who's in the business that does this similar stuff with clients, when Sunday morning rolls around and there's an opportunity to do something more fun, or we're tired from the weekend, it's tough to commit to. Even for somebody like me who knows how valuable that time is to get set up and stay on top of it. So again, I think the accountability piece that you bring to the table is huge. So meeting regularly, and you're getting into cash flow, you're digging into their systems or providing some budgeting tools. What does that typically look like when you're working with clients?
Yeah. So I love Monarch right now. I think I talked to you about that, that I've been using it so far for 6 months, and clients are absolutely loving it as a budgeting tool, and also just being able to see all their accounts in one place. And it's just, hey, like any transactions we need to review or look at, like, did you go through that? Like categories, like, do we need to readjust like where you're spending your money? Is that how you're like, are you prioritizing the things that we've talked about that bring you joy? Or did these kind of just happen because it was an inconvenience or a spontaneous moment that you said yes to something? And I think those moments where clients can look at it and be like, oh yeah, that was kind of like a moment where I wasn't expecting to spend that much money going out to eat with friends, and I just had to put my card down. Right. So that like the next time they hit that situation, it's more conscious awareness of like, how do you approach your friends and talk to them about the priorities that you have around spending and where like savings. Like, those are conversations I think a lot of people, millennials right now, I think are the biggest ones where they're like, I don't know how to tell people that I have like bigger priorities with my money and I don't want to spend my money there.
That's an interesting point. And I think, unfortunately, it feels like the opportunity for social comparison and just kind of taking a look around, and people are constantly, influencers on social media, and they're traveling the world and they're doing all this fun, cool stuff. But yeah, that's an interesting point that you call out. It's tough for people to say no in social circumstances. How do you help them with that? What advice would you give that person the next time they show up to that restaurant? How do you broach that subject with your friends?
Yeah, I think we have to go through like a couple different like scenarios of like, hey, like, are there opportunities where you can share with your friends that like you don't want to go out to eat at that restaurant, or that, you're only going to go out for drinks, or just being aware that like having the conversation ahead of time with yourself to understand how you're going to approach it will help you. And then communicate. It just is communicating sometimes of like telling people like, hey, do we have a budget for this restaurant when we go to eat? Cause, there's some things I have to prioritize this month, right? Like that's an easy conversation to share before you're at dinner, like with the invoice, basically the bill sitting in front of you. And you're like, all right, I just spent $200 on going out this month.
It's kind of an interesting connection as we're kind of talking through it right now, but there's a big movement of folks who are not drinking anymore. And it's this, I'm going to be a social pariah if I don't drink alcohol. And, when you listen to people talk about their experience, and I know, people that have gone through this on the financial side, it's usually not as bad as they think it's going to be. And in a lot of cases, it sounds like they kind of inspire their friends to either not drink or get their own budget in order and get their own priorities. Do you find that, people, when they bring this up and approach it with their friends, that the response is more positive than they thought it was going to be going in?
Yeah, I think I actually have like a group of friends right now who are like the three of them are all clients. And it's like one of them triggered the next one because it was like, oh, hey, like I'm on a budget and I'm working with a financial advisor right now to like save for a house. And then the next girl was like, oh, I think I need that too. And now the three of them are all on this like, hey, we can like do things that are fun together. We all can talk about our budgets or like what we're willing to spend when we go to a concert or go out to eat. And it created this space where they now feel comfortable.
They're all like financially sober.
Yeah.
Right. Together. You might have coined a new phrase. That's really cool.
Have you heard about it was like a TikTok trend for a little bit. I haven't seen it too much now, but it's the loud budgeting.
Yeah, that's the other thing that was in the back of my mind. Yeah, exactly. It's just putting it out there and being willing and open to kind of share with people what you're up to creates a safe space for other people to kind of raise their hand and say, hey, that's kind of interesting. Yeah. What's your take on all that?
I think it's fun. I do agree with it that like the more that you can share around what you're willing to spend or spending helps other people understand a little bit more about where you're coming from or where you're at.
Right.
And I think it is. It's just, we tend to gravitate to, I think probably you've seen this too. It's like you end up in the same circles of people who usually have the same income or same spending habits as you, but you don't actually really know most of the time, like what their income is or what they're spending. It's just like what kind of feels comfortable for you in that moment.
Right. Right. And I know, I'm sure you have similar experiences. Sitting down with a client for the first time, their financial profile often doesn't align with what you would expect based on what they're putting out in the world on social media or what they talk about or where they live. You never really know what's going on in somebody's finances unless they're willing to share openly. And oftentimes, I think that's the problem is we make decisions based on what we see happening around us. And, what you see, especially on social media, often doesn't line up with reality. And a lot of those folks that you think are doing well and living a life that you want to live are really strapped and just anxious about their finances and have a lot of challenges. So it's definitely a good kind of word of warning to kind of check when you're comparing yourself to other people in that whole social comparison piece. It's really challenging, but really focusing on what's important to you, it sounds like a great place to kind of get back to.
Yeah. The emotional side of finances is the other piece. I think that it just is, it's interesting to me to see people like who are financially secure and they're still dealing with anxiety and stress.
Yeah. So it's cool to hear you talk about, not only monitoring spending and looking at transactions, but really connecting those things back to what they said was important to them, what's bringing them joy, and making sure you're kind of connecting those dots and kind of going through scenarios where you can avoid some of the challenges that you have. What are some of the other things you coached to at that point? I think a lot of what both of us do in different ways comes down to helping clients change behavior, which can be really kind of the most challenging part. What types of exercises or homework or frameworks do you use to help people actually implement new behavior and change how they're operating?
Yeah, so it's different for everybody based on what works for them. And I think a lot of that is trial and error, right? Like, do we need to like be taking out cash so that you only spend cash when you're going out to a restaurant or need to go shopping? Are we like focusing on, reorganizing how you spend on your credit cards and like using specific credit cards for specific purchases so you can be more aware of that? Sometimes it really is like having like more check-ins sometimes with clients, like, hey, like you need to put a system in place where you go in and check your budget to be more aware of this. So it's a hard question to answer because everyone's so different, but those are kind of like some quick examples from like clients. I think that.
Yeah, no, it's totally unfair. So I apologize. I often put people on the spot with questions I just think of on the fly. Not to switch gears, but in looking into your profile and your background, I found online that you are a licensed hypnotist. Do I have that right? And would you mind explaining where that came from and where it fits in your work and what you do with clients?
Yeah. So about a year ago, I really was like diving into more of like the emotional side of like clients' behaviors and things like that as well. And there's a part of me that was like, all right, I have this client, he's worth $5 million sitting there and he still is so stressed, so anxious, like he's got a solid income. There's no reason why like the stress and the anxiety should be setting in. Right. And it was these few moments where I was like, no matter like how secure we make him with his finances, like the emotions are still playing so much of a role in his day-to-day actions and behaviors, and could probably disrupt his like marriage and relationship and family because he's bringing it into that. And it just was that moment where you're like, all right, well, these are emotions that he's dealing with. They're coming from like subconscious beliefs and thoughts. And that's coming from like childhood traumas and things like that probably, his dad or grandparent, embedded in him at such an early age. And so hypnotherapy was something that I was like kind of researching and understanding a little bit more. And really what it is just like being able to kind of talk to those subconscious thoughts and be able to kind of quiet those emotions and those nerves to understand where it's coming from and be able to create like a space where you can kind of work through it and change that fear and that anxiety into something that's more peaceful and secure and joyful. Yeah. And so got certified in hypnotherapy, neuro-linguistic programming, and emotional freedom tapping, which is like all three of those like techniques are really cool. When someone just kind of, it's like they know what to do, but they still don't do what they know or like can't get over that hurdle or that hump.
Yeah. And NLP relates to kind of a fear, kind of a wanting for security, if I understand NLP. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of that difference between like the conscious and the subconscious brain. So being able to understand like what your conscious brain wants and knows, but then like what the subconscious brain is like telling you, like telling the
kind of identify when your body is reacting. Your subconscious brain is reacting to something, maybe emotionally or based on fear, and kind of helping yourself get into that other side of your brain to pause and respond or just give yourself some space to kind of work through it.
And a lot of the like techniques for neuro-linguistic programming are like getting to the root cause of like what is causing that fear. Like what is driving that? Like what was the moment in time in your past where like you feel like fear was driving or was the driving factor that now is almost dripping over into everything in your life, and kind of being able to kind of decrease that fear and realize that it's coming from a childhood trauma, and how do we kind of release it a little bit more?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So I have talked to life coaches that do financial planning work, and kind of the overlap of those two things has a lot to do with understanding where you come from, but you're one of the first people that I've talked to that's getting more into like the hypnotherapy, NLP, EFT, which is like the tapping work, right?
Yep.
Which is really a really interesting kind of take or approach to all of that, rather than just lines of questioning and kind of, discussion around where you come from. To actually have some protocols that you can bring to the table and help people with is pretty cool. So before we like leave people thinking that you're just like, passing the watch back and forth and hypnotizing people, do you want to just give us a brief description? What does that actually look like in practice? Either hypnotherapy or the tapping or NLP work, high level?
Yeah. So high level, it really is just a really high level of meditation where you're calming your conscious brain to a point where it kind of almost like your brain relaxes enough where you can start talking to your subconscious brain a little bit more. So a lot of it is like the intro to hypnotherapy, like when you're getting hypnotized, is really just like calming your brain so that you relax enough to be able to talk to the subconscious brain. So a lot of people actually have experience with like R-rated hypnotherapy. I don't know if you ever went to one, but like the beginning 5 to 10 minutes is him, right? Or like the person that's facilitating is like just getting you to relax. So then he can get you to do things, a chicken dance. That's all R-rated, right? But like, it's the same process. Is what we're doing is we're really relaxing the conscious brain enough so that you can talk to the subconscious brain. And then based on the conversations that we've had around like, hey, we want to feel, excited, and we want to, work towards paying off debt, and you feel confident when you look at your money and there's no anxiety. Like those are the conversations then that you can have with the subconscious brain once you're relaxed. And then it kind of just is more like that repetition of continuing to like keep doing it and ingrain it into your brain, because your brain is functioning off of a lot of repetition.
Right.
And sometimes people have been consciously working on things for years, but because their subconscious brain can't get on board, that's why they can't succeed.
Right. Again, I think it's such an interesting approach, and it kind of brings up the difference between therapy, which I think is really, really important, but it's, I think, often described as more of a kind of backward looking exploration of what might have gone on in your past. And coaching really gets into, all right, how do we get you through it and move you forward? Not that therapy doesn't do that. But, and I know a lot of people who talk about mindset and getting into the right space to kind of think about some of these things. But I just think it's really, really cool that you actually have an approach and certifications and protocols to actually help people do it, and not just say, hey, read Carol Dweck's mindset and, just change your approach to life, right? That's not, it's easier said than done for a lot of people. So I think it's really cool you have some work to bring to the table to really help people in that way. It's super interesting. So I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah. It's been fun to, like, tools to like figure out with people and figure out how to implement it into like the financial coaching and practice as well. So
were you a little nervous the first time you kind of rolled that out in real life, or did you try in your friends or family? How did you, what's the learning curve for something like that?
Yeah, it was a lot of practice sessions where I was like, you know what, I don't want to bring this to clients quite yet. And it's something too, like a lot of my older clients that I didn't have this like piece before, like still some of them are like, I don't know what that really means or looks like. Yeah. But now as I bring clients on more, it's like, hey, I have all these tools as well that we can implement into your financial coaching. And they're a lot more open to it.
Yeah, when the time is right. That's cool.
Yeah.
So what is your work? Before I let you go, where should people check out your work, and what do your programs look like? How do people reach out and work with you? Do you have different options? Do you do educational work? Where should people go to check you out?
Yeah. Finances with Jen. I'm on Instagram. I think that's kind of like where you can just get to know me a little bit more. Baseplanning.co is my website, which kind of houses all the nitty gritty details, and you can book a calendar, link with me just to chat. Yeah. So I work with clients one-on-one. That's like my main practice right now, is bringing on one-on-one clients. I do have a digital course, which is just like a workbook and more DIY option to just dip your toes into trying it on your own. But I really believe in the accountability piece and the coaching. So that's where it's like,
yeah.
Unless you have a lot of self-discipline and can really dive into it.
Well, I think it's probably a good place for people to start if they don't feel like they're ready and they want to explore a little bit more. But I'd imagine a lot of people, when they start to dig into that work, they probably realize that, yeah, I'm going to call Jen and maybe book a one-on-one because I could really use that accountability piece, right? It's not that the information or the work is that daunting in and of itself, but sometimes it takes that accountability piece to get it over the top.
Yeah. I do have a group coaching program right now. It's a 6-month commitment for people to just get started with budgeting and getting their accounts organized and having, nice check-ins. And even the group aspect of it too is nice because you realize you're not in it alone.
Right. Yeah.
So that's been fun. And those are kind of like the three options for right now.
Awesome. Well, I encourage everybody to check out Base and check out Jen's work. Last couple of questions before I let you go. I ask everybody, are there any recommendations for books, podcasts that you listen to? You mentioned a couple earlier that you started with when you started to educate yourself. What are the things that you're checking out right now that you think might be useful for other people to explore?
Yeah, I do really like Ramit Sethi's podcast right now. I think it's really helpful sometimes to hear where other people are coming from and like listen to their stories.
I get asked all the time what I think about that. And I think that's the biggest benefit, regardless if I view opinion. He's, has strong feelings about the way people should work with advisors. Yeah. And for better or worse, I think one of the biggest benefits is just seeing other people go through similar things and face similar challenges. I think they do a great job of highlighting that. So that's a great call out.
Yeah, I think it is. It's like this space where we don't talk or hear what other people are dealing with behind closed doors around money and finances. And he does a great job of like asking real life questions of like, how are you dealing with and managing money? Yeah. And then, I think, kind of Dave Ramsey too. Like, again, like you can hear people's questions and thoughts. I don't fully agree with all his advice there, but it gets you integrated into what people are actually kind of facing when it comes to their financial lives.
Yeah. Yeah. He's another one. He can be fairly polarizing, but at its core, it's financial education and it's spotlighting a pretty taboo topic for people. So I think there's a lot of benefit there as well. So appreciate that. And finally, this being a show about financial well-being, but well-being in general. And you've talked about a lot of things, like high-level meditation, essentially being, what the core of some of your work is. Are there any habits or rituals, routines, things you go back to help yourself feel a little bit better and kind of improve your overall well-being?
Yeah, I am a fitness junkie, and I think movement is medicine. And I think also, again, when you're dealing with a lot of emotions when it comes to life and finances and managing families, and it's the best thing you can do. And money can help support that astronomically. And also it can like extend your life and quality of life as well. So it's something I love sharing with people, like my journey with fitness too, because I think it's also helped just endorphins overall and perspective of life and quality of life too.
Feeling ready to kind of face the challenges and move through it. It's great. Yeah. Appreciate it. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Did we miss anything about your work or what's important about financial coaching and consulting? Any final words? Do you think we covered it?
No, I don't think so. I think you and I kind of connected off of just the importance of how important financial planning is, but on so many different levels, it's just more than numbers, which is why like these conversations are so important.
Yeah, absolutely. You being a financial coach or consultant, I'm a financial planner, but I think we see the world very similarly. And it's great to talk to you to just let people know that there's tons of resources out there and there's a good fit and there's a great accountability partner that you can find to get the help that you way back when originally sought. So it's really cool that it's, come full circle and become your business. So congratulations. Best of luck on future success. And thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time.